it is a lonely place because, especially on the outside, often there's nothing wrong with one's career. Only one knows deeply what's going on, whether there's been a deep misalignment of interest and passion and purpose, or some other situation that's been going on that makes them feel that their potential is not fulfilled, or down in the world in the immediate future, this current setup would not serve them anymore. We live in a time that holding down one job title for a whole career is not possible anymore. At some point of our journey, we can expect a career reinvention is going to happen. So how do we embrace that? What does it take for us to navigate a career reinvention mindfully and sometimes even proactively? On this season of the Everyday Talent Podcast, we are talking about Tales of Reinvention. Tune in as we dive into this topic with fellow creatives and experts. Welcome to the Everyday Talent Podcast. This is your go-to podcast for the most honest look into all things creative career related. I'm your host, Betty. I'm a creative, a nonprofit consultant, and a career and business coach for creative people just like you. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. Hello, everyone. How is it going? If you're watching this on YouTube, you know that for my backdrop, I'm home now. I've been traveling the world for the last 4 months, and now I'm back to Toronto, Canada, in my own home, recording to you this episode. As you have been listening to the last few episodes, you know that I've had a lot of reflections on my journey trying the digital nomad life. And one of the things that I've been thinking very deeply about is today's episode's topic, career reinvention. Because on the world, I have met a lot of people, friends from past life, friends that we are making, new friends that we make that have reinvented their career, whether it's about relocating to another country, uprooting themselves, or moving back to their country of origin and then pursuing something totally differently. Recently, also, there has been a lot of layoffs in a lot of industries in North America, particularly I'm thinking about the tech industry as well as the creative industry. So there have been a lot of conversations, even with outside work, that come up naturally about exits, new beginnings, how to reinvent oneself in a new place, in a new lane, in a new position. And when it's a drastic change like that, it takes a lot of planning, thinking, and deep reflections, and potentially completely revamping one's mindset. It feels almost like embarking on a new life. And so I thought the first episode back from the trip, recording this to you, I have to tackle this topic right on. In fact, I haven't had an interesting relationship with the term career reinvention. For those of you who have visited my website and potentially consider working with me, you know that my signature one-on-one coaching program, 4 months one-on-one coaching program right now, is called the Mindful Reinvention. But interesting enough, I've had a kind of bittersweet or reluctant relationship with this word reinvention, especially when I started out as a career coach. Because my first impression, maybe my very biased assumption about it, is that it sounds almost like a clickbait. It's very overly dramatic. It feels like it could have been, like the word reinvention could have been replaced by the word transition, shift, pivot. And so I was very reluctant to even talk about that or use that term. However, as I met more people since I did coaching and more people come in my coaching room, I noticed that word, even though I avoided other people that I coach, people that potentially want to work with me, people that I meet just like for casual conversation on career, started using that term. And I have actually come around and embraced that term because I think the word reinvention, while it does gesture something dramatic, sometimes it is needed when one is at the bottom of burnout, when one feels really trapped by the current job, current career situation. A simple lateral shift, a small tweak, is just not enough. And often, clients could come to me to try to have a discovery call and want to explore working with me. They are not people who have just had a whim and think about, oh, maybe I should like do some change in my career. Let me talk to a career coach. No, usually it's not like that, right? Usually, clients who come to me have been thinking on their own about, should I be making this deeply meaningful change? What does it take to make changes in my current context? Why do I feel so stuck? What are the things that I can do to gain that clarity so that it's a transformative change in my career and life? They've been sitting in the dark and thinking about this, sometimes very alone and lonely. It is a lonely place because, especially on the outside, often there's nothing wrong with one's career. Only one knows deeply what's going on, whether there's been a deep misalignment of interest and passion and purpose, or some other situation that's been going on that makes them feel that their potential is not fulfilled, or down in the world in the immediate future, this current setup would not serve them anymore. So in times like this, a transition, a shift, they're not like comprehensive enough to encapsulate how one feels and what one wants. A transition sometimes sounds like shifting a lane of the world, and a pivot might feel like turning a different corner and making a U-turn. A reinvention, though, takes courage, gut, determination, action, and it is definitely not an overnight project. One knows that one is potentially considering reinvention or on the brink of reinventing oneself when the question of how will I tell people what I do now if I make that shift or make that change bothers you. That happens a lot to clients that come in my room. Is they think that if they completely, for example, exit one industry, specifically, I have clients that come to me who want to quit the arts or quit the nonprofit industry and now go work for something totally different. They have a bit of fear, maybe not even just a bit. They have some fear around how would they go back to their community and tell them that, hey, the past setup no longer serve me. I'm out. I'm going to a new place. One also knows that one is on the brink of reinventing oneself when the urgency is not just external, it is even more about internal urgency. And I mean that by you know that you are almost losing a sense of who you are by feeling so trapped in your current situation. Your voice wisdom is telling you to make this shift. It's not just simply getting a new job. It's potentially a mindset revamped almost, or shifting so much about your perspective, looking at your relationship with your career and your relationship with work, your relationship with your creativity, and reclaim something about your life and yourself. But even though I've come to embrace the term of reinvention, and as you can see, I've now renamed my one-on-one coaching program to be called Mindful Reinvention. I call it that because I know that just simply the term reinvention can have its danger. Often, people who are thinking about reinvent, like by the word reinvention, it automatically implies that you're not starting as a new person on the job market or in the workforce. You're somewhere in the middle of your career, potentially, and you feel like you cannot afford another mistake. I hear that a lot as well in the coaching room, where, well, if I make this like complete change in career, I don't want it to be another failure or mistake. And you perceive that your old lane is a failure where you have to reinvent yourself. At the same time, though, you desperately want to get out of your current situation. So there's also a part of you that, while not wanting to make mistake, you're kind of saying, I would take anything to get out of this current setup. So that danger lies exactly in that like tornness, right? Because if you make an intentional decision now, you might be worse off than where you are at if you just take anything that comes up. However, because you're afraid that you'll be a failure and mistake again, you're not taking any action at all also. So you might be overthinking and over worrying about this in your own head. But for months now, you have not done anything about it. So you're in that kind of freezing, but also taking very like an intentional decision. It always feels like a spring that can like flip one side or the other. And either situation is not great. So today on this episode right here, what I want to talk about is some of my thoughts having worked with clients to reinvent their career. What are some key tips and thoughts on how one can have a mindful career reinvention? So I have a list here, and I really sat down before this episode and like I actually like wrote it first, and then I took a break and I was like, I really want to get this right, or at least get this as intentional and comprehensive as possible. Because I know if you're interested in this episode and listening this far, you really like you might be considering something in your own situation and your own context. And it's more the more important that I'm conveying to you something that is useful and mindful. So I have a list of tips here. And for each of the tips, I also have what I call the voice of panic comment, uh, which is commonly what I hear when people are thinking about career reinvention, that their mind filled with fear or sometimes shame and other difficult emotion that tell that there's a little voice of panic inside of them that tells them. And it's important that we acknowledge that voice of panic and also address it in a calm and neutral way, and understand that we don't necessarily need to give in to it. Okay. So the list of tips I have here for mindfully reinventing one's career. The first one, don't burn everything down. And right here, the voice of panic comment that I'm addressing is that everything that comes before this point is useless. I'm going to repeat that. Everything that comes before this point is useless. That voice, I'm not sure whether you have heard it inside you, but I've certainly heard it in times when I feel that I need to reinvent myself as a business owner or as a consultant, or in other points in my career where there's a drastic change. I feel like nothing that I've done up to this point is useful. And I have heard that as well when clients come to me to sign up for the one-on-one coaching program and they want to, for example, exit the industry or move to a completely different world. And they feel that all the skills that come before this is non-transferable. The portfolio that they built, they can't even show it to the new industry, the employers in the new industry, or they want to have their own business or own practice and be self-employed, but they have learned nothing about those skills. I just want to address that voice, and instead of really harshly say that's not true, which yes, it's not true. But maybe just like really curiously ask that voice, like how much of that is true? Maybe there's certain things that you don't find transferable. It's like the skill sets that you learn, very specific one pertain to your current job or up to this point. But often than not, in one conversation with clients, I will uncover that their core strengths, the skills that they build out, some of the things that connections they build out are related to the new direction that they want to go. So it's not a really, never a really clear cut. And your wisdom and your work experience, awareness about yourself up to this point in your career, they're definitely not going to the trash can. Even though we are talking about reinvention, it feels very drastic. Don't burn everything that comes before this point. Instead, use them as very good information to inform how might they support you in this new lane, in this new path. So that's tip number one. Number two, dare to dream. More than ever, when you're considering a career reinvention, that is the time for you to once again truly envision what you need and what you want. And the voice of panic that I'm addressing here is that I would take anything. We've heard that even I'm sure you've heard that at some point in your life, whether it's from your own voice or from other people's voice, sharing that they feel trapped in their current job. This job is dead end. This path is no good. I would take anything to get out. And that in that, I would take everything voice. There's danger there because truly, you're not really you would take anything. We're not talking about you're like freshly off, or you're looking for a part-time job as a high school student and your only objective is to get any work and I would take anything. That's possibly the only time. And even then, I would probably argue there's some requirements that one should have. But that's possibly the only time one should take anything. If you're already in the middle of your career, you accumulated some achievements, some experience, and chances are the reason that you're thinking about reinvention is because your current setup does not fulfill your needs. So why would you take anything to change the current thing? You have to take the thing that you really want. And I know it feels like if you are going to a new industry, new role, you're not deserving of that. And that's why I'm doing this episode and saying to you here, you can, right? If the new change is not even better in terms of aligning with your needs and wants, why are you changing? And so what all actually happened, let me tell you what actually happened in the real context is that when I work with clients to reinvent themselves there, whether they're shifting from having a job into having independent business, or they are changing industry, they're exiting from a very toxic situation. It actually takes I'm willing to bet my money on it now that I've had lots of experience working with clients. The first hump that we cross over is this exact mindset that they're not worth anything anymore. We're rebuilding that confidence in them. And once they're able to, in the what I call in the affirmative sense, because oftentimes when we're panicked and we are stressed and we are trapped, we think about things in the negative sense. I do not want a toxic boss. I do not want being underpaid. Once we get to a place where we can claim our wish and wants in an affirmative sense, I sense that we're getting somewhere. And the funny thing is this, I always get almost I both touch, but also want to shake my client up and be like, did you hear your vision and your dream? It's like how achievable that is. I've never had people coming my, probably because I don't work with those clients that they say I need to be filthy rich. I need to be the most famous person in the world. I'm making really exaggerated example. Like, like things that are so, I wouldn't even call them out of touch. They're so out of context because usually you're in the middle of your career, you've lived a little, you know exactly what you want, and it's often about inner peace. It's about calmer balance. It's about having a deeper connection with your creativity. It's about working more purposefully. It's about having the space to live your life rather than being working all the time, but at the same time not make compromise on your work achievements. Those common things is usually what we want, and we have to be able to dream it in order to pursue it. So that's number two. Number three, broaden your perspective. And I mean this in a lot of all sense of that word. I know it sounds very generic almost, but because it's very broad. And so it can be the couple things. Going to travel and see how the world operates and zoom out of your current situation so that certain things that you care so much right now at this moment in your industry or at your organization, at your job, don't seem as important anymore. They're still important, but in the bigger scheme of the world, of history, and I've heard this as also a tip that for the therapists give for people who have anxiety, that sometimes we zoom in a situation and we get into all the nitty gritty and we think that this is all that there is. But when you are able to zoom out, you see that, wow, that's actually such a small piece, maybe still a significant piece of my life, my career, and the world. And there are more to it in this world. And so, whatever that takes to broaden your perspective, whether it's go to travel, go for a retreat for a while, I also mean this tip in another way, which is in a very specific way. Actually, I'm thinking about social media. I had so here I'm going to share an anecdote. I had an interesting experience where I was coaching a client and she really wants to get off her current job and change to a completely different kinds of organization. She wasn't really looking to change industry per se, but she would be open to just changing kinds of organization. And one thing that she tells me, and she's not alone in this, sometimes people come back and say, I go on my LinkedIn and I don't even see other jobs available. I don't think there's anything else out there. And in that specific context, that specific instant, I was like, is really? And I just opened up my LinkedIn on the call and I did the same keyword as she did. And I had a whole bunch of because I'm not in her industry, not in the types of organization she's working. And I came up with a whole bunch of random jobs that is that on her LinkedIn simply did not come up. What does that story tell you? Don't fall for your own algorithm. We all, I think, know how algorithm works now. If it is feeding you the information that they think is relevant to you, and the more that it feeds you, and more that you see that, the more that it generate the same kind of information. And we know that probably more aware of that in the news cycle. But it's the same thing with job seeking, opportunity seeking. You are somewhat trapped in your own media algorithm. I don't care which platform you're using. In the anecdote I gave, it was LinkedIn, but same thing is Instagram. When you are so entrenched in types of organization, types of jobs, and you realize all your connections on your social media also do the similar things, and you suddenly, your world becomes very small. And I don't have a definite solution to that other than asking you to be wary of it. And maybe it's not a far-fetched solution, actually, that when you're looking, you almost need to ask your friends to help you to be hey, or create be in, what's that mode? Incognito mode, and search out what things out there that escape your own algorithm. Yes, we live in that world that's actually very important now. And when you're broadening your perspective, it's also about making connections, new networks, right? That's another pain point people have, which is how can I make connections in this new industry? And often I'm like, how did you make connections when you were entering your existing industry or your existing lane? it feels much more difficult when you're somewhat established already and have to make that new thing of networking, entering a new space. I understand. But sometimes it's not about networking aimlessly either. Same tip that I would give for this as the last tip, which is be very specific who you want to meet. If you are exploring a new industry, uh, if you combine the tips that I give you, you're probably going to meet someone that is trying a decision maker, someone that's relatively have the experience in that new place, that new arena that you want to explore, and have some experience that they can pass to you or tips that is good for you. So rather than I will meet anybody, in that new arena. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm a broken record by this point. Be very specific, the new kind of connections that you want to make. And you'll be surprised that like your network, especially your personal network, not just your career network who's in the same arena that you're playing in, you have more connections than you think there are. And the world is bigger, even your industry is bigger than what you're swimming in right now. Number 4, tell your story like you're telling your friend's story. I love this tip. I really marinated on this one. And it comes from addressing that voice of panic, saying, they are going to think that I failed my last thing. They're going to think that I have no experience. Imagine they. And usually this gestures towards the new potential employers, people that could interview you, or people in the new industry, or if you're relocating geographically, people in the new world, like new location. And it feels like especially if you're exiting something, or you got let go, or you intentionally quit a somewhat important job, you feel the burden of like explaining every single detail that went down. And it can, like, I'm not gonna lie, I've coached people who like have very difficult exit, regardless of the reason. Maybe it's because organization shift, maybe because the environment was very toxic, maybe like they had a very difficult time in their life in that period. And when you're looking at it from a very subjective personal perspective, you feel like when you're reinventing yourself in that new context and with new people, you have to tell them every single thing about your life story, your failure, your shame, your difficulty, which I know it feels really raw to you. But if we shift our perspective a little bit, if this is happening to our friend, and we're specific here, I'm not saying like our best friend, because usually we know all the ups and downs of our best friend's life. I'm just saying like from our, like a good friend, someone that we know, they're going through a career reinvention, but from our perspective, probably just a career shift and transition. And and you know a little bit of what's going on. And now you have to recommend them to this new employer potentially, or new groups of people, audience, or new potential customers. How would you tell their friend's story? Are you really going to say, well, they messed up in the last thing, so now they're trying this new thing? What a failure. Often, I don't think I've ever told my friend's story like that. And I don't actually also know that much of like nitty gritty details of their mindset. If you're shifting the perspective of telling it from your friend's perspective, then you know that like, oh yeah, like you probably tell it from like a very objective or rather neutral stance. So it's going through a transition. Uh, they no longer want to work in that industry. They see that the potential is not fulfilled, and now they have explored a new potential in a new arena. I'm just making an example there, but that's if we just like take that same story and shift it to your own tone and telling a potential employer, that's the exact amount of calmness and detail that you need to tell the new employer. I previously worked in the arts, and up to a certain point, I've developed a lot of like leadership skills. a lot of management skills and a lot of event planning skills. However, like I felt that my potential was capped. And now I am moving and exploring in this new industry to see what's new possibility for myself. So see how I face things there. You're not diminishing the things that you built out. Don't burn everything down. You're not overly giving details that they did not ask for in an interview. And you're honest. I have to stress that. Like you're not lying about anything. You're just simply telling it from a calmer stance than the one in your brain is called panic brain that is telling you. So um definitely practice this. Like if you're reinventing yourself, like there will come a point that you are going to new interviews or telling your story again into a new audience. Practice this as if you are your friend telling your story. Tip number 5 and the last tip on the list, give yourself a buffer. As you have heard up to this point in this episode, the reinvention project is not an overnight project. Now, you might be able to reinventing yourself overnight. I'm not excluding that possibility, but for most of us here, because it involves intentional planning, involves like uh, rebuilding your confidence, it involves like crafting your story, it involves like developing your new package for like whether it's resume or new business. It's not going to, for most of us anyway, it's not going to happen overnight. So I'm going to go very practical here with this tips, which is giving yourself a buffer. And in essence, I'm talking about giving yourself a buffer of financial buffer, or whatever that gives you a sense of security. Give yourself a buffer, because if the urgency is inducing a sense of insecurity and that you have an urgent need to make up some financial payments or whatever finance needs that comes up, and then it kind of overshadows everything that we talk about so far in terms of like claiming what you truly want, in terms of like looking, broadening your perspective, in terms of like making new connections and recrafting your story. So I think when you're thinking about reinventions, whatever buffer that you can give yourself is important. And I acknowledge that there are different ways, and I also acknowledge that sometimes there's no way. And what I mean by that is like in the different ways scenario, I've met clients or people who are in that spot, and they, because they work a bit, they pass saving, they know that they have a little bit of buffer. They also have family income sometimes that can support them for a while. But there's also times where people are like, no, I really cannot, I really don't have other means of giving me that buffer. And so it's also very common that you're doing this reinvention project while you're on your current job. And there's no shame and nothing wrong with that. In fact, I applaud your courage that you know that you are consciously like giving yourself that security and that sense of like no rush. I still have my current setup, and I'm also intentionally thinking about the future. And also the other scenario where, if you've been let go from your previous situation where job or situation where you're not in a financially secure place, but you want to be intentional about reinventing yourself. I've also given the tips of like what is the path of least resistance. People have taken like jobs or things that they don't need to be so mindful about, but generate some level of income so that their mind and their body is relatively in a secure, calm place. So taking a temporary job, essentially, like the interim job. So none of that, I think it's important for me to adjust that right on. None of that option is wrong. All of that is possible, and they are, you do whatever you need to give yourself that sense of security and also peace of mind so that you have that space to be intentional about reinventing yourself. So, let me repeat those 5 tips that I gave in this episode very quickly. Number 1, don't burn everything down. You have more experience than you think. Number 2, dare to dream. Now is the time to envision what you truly need and want. Number 3, broaden your perspective. Don't get trapped in your social media algorithm. Number 4, tell your story like you're telling your friend's story. And number 5, give yourself a buffer. I want to say that more and more, especially the times and maybe even this year that we're living in, career reinventors are becoming the norm, not the exception. Growing up, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat as me, as millennials, we have heard stories of our parents, our grandparents' generation where they have done one thing in their own, in their career, and that's it. Maybe they even had only one job and worked for one company their whole life. That is totally not the norm anymore. I think everybody will agree. And because that's not the norm, in our career paths, it's inevitable that there are moments of reinvention. So I hope this episode has given you some starting points to think about how to mindfully reinvent yourself. We're not looking for a rush decision. We're not looking for, we just kind of take anything kind of situation. You know that to make this change, it involves diligence and focus and determination. And after all that hard work, don't you want something that is truly aligned with you? And of course, if you need support on that journey, you can also get help. My one-on-one coaching program is now open. You can book a free consultation call with me. Usually what happens is that we delve deeper into your stories, your current context. And I think for those of you who have gone on a free coaching consultation call with me, one of the things that I'm known for, I'm radically honest about whether we are fit or not. I've definitely turned away clients when I think that the fit is not there. So we can always have a conversations. And my wish is that, of course, if we are fit, we work together. That's wonderful. And even when there's not a fit, I hope that on that single call, I've provided you some support and hopefully can point you to the right direction to seek support. So you can book a one-on-one coaching consultation call with me completely free with the link in the show notes or on my social media. As well, uh, I want to take this opportunity to promote something that now that I'm back to Toronto, I'm cooking something out that is quite special. I'm partnering with my friend and colleague, KJ, who is a certified trauma informed yoga practitioner and teacher. And we are partnering to do an in-person event. It will be one of the very first in-person events I'm co-hosting. So we on May 25th, which is a Sunday. And by the time this episode air, it will be exactly 1 month out, I believe. So we will be hosting an afternoon called Into Your Flow in studio in Toronto, downtown Toronto. And what we are doing is a series of guided exercise on somatic experiencing, breathing work, and also creative journaling. And the intention for this workshop is to connect our body and mind and replenish our creative spirit. Because often, one thing that I notice when I coach clients is that we all desire the sense of flow. It's almost become this buzzword of how do I get in flow? How do I get in creative flow? And however, when we talk about it in the creative, work kind of sense, we almost talk about it in silo in terms of getting into the flow of working. However, we all know that intuitively, flow is actually exists in our body, in our spirit, and not just in our work. So through this workshop, we are going to explore the different ways of entering flow and how they are interconnected. And so we'll do things like grounding exercise, breath work, and KJ will lead us through that. And for my portion, I will lead you through a free writing creative journaling with prompts and also group reflection together about the experience of flow. And so with the support of each other's presence, we'll collectively come up with better awareness for our unique way of entering and exiting flow. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the episode show notes. It will be great to meet you in person. The spots are very limited because the size of the studio that the event will be hosting, and we also want this to be a very intimate event. So check out the link and sign if you're interested. Sign up as soon as possible. May we all be intentional on our paths when we're pursuing career reinvention or sometimes just career transition. And so I'm so happy to be sharing these tips that I've garnered from my own experience and also experience of working with clients. If you want to connect with me, you know where I am. My social links are in the show notes. And I will see you on the next episode.